And in contrast to the previous movies where I showed you how to build the front and the back fork, in this model I actually followed a different approach because from the beginning I wanted to be able to crease my outer edges of my design. So that I have to change the value here a little bit. I used the wrong one. Minus 0.8, not 0.8. So as you can see, along here and here and here, everything is very nice and crisp. So the way how I got to there was actually following a somewhat different workflow. And for example, here, if you see in the bottom part, you see how nicely everything follows and then fans out. And you have super crisp edges. And then in between, you have very nice and soft transitions. So it's actually a very beautiful surface that is created that way. To get to there, let me go back to my different model versions. For example, here you see how I very basically started to block out the different proportions, kind of like the main frame and then the axis part. So yeah, put in a 5-sided circle, trying to plan out maybe the different faces I need. And then here I put everything together. Now again, the way how I did this was basically, let me delete those edges. So I would have, for example, selected this edge and then say, well, one has to go to here, one has to go to there, one has to go to there, and then I can go ahead and say you and you fill, you and you fill, you and you fill, fill. This edge and this edge can fill, this edge and this edge can fill, and then this edge and this edge can fill. So that's the way how I got to there. But now to, I shot myself. I'm out of undo steps. Well, I'm going to delete those for a moment. So please spare with me. I'm just quickly only creating a new placeholder geometry. So let's say like this. So let's say that would be our model. And now you see how this is all cut out. And in the top view, you can also already see that the front part is not scaled and the back part is not scaled, because I can go ahead now and create 2 loop cuts. For example, here I can create 2 loop cuts there. And I also have to create those loop cuts up here. With this done, and then I actually can go ahead and, for example, I have to make one more loop cut here. And I can select those edges and, for example, delete them. And then one more step is filling in the missing faces. And same basically here. And then I can go ahead, for example, this doesn't look good. It has to be tighter, so maybe minus 0.9 and minus 0.9. So I'm memorizing the creasing values, and maybe here minus 0.8 and minus 0.8. Here I could 0.8 maybe and 0.8. So that was basically the approach I used for sculpting those. You see, it's not very difficult to do. It's just a different approach. You need to maybe play around a little bit with the correct mesh density so you get the results you're shooting for. And then when this, for example, is good, then I could go ahead and say, well, let's crease this one. So minus 0.8 and 0.8 for the outside and 0.8 minus and 0.8. But for example, the inside here is round. I would like to crease this as well. There are two ways now. I could go and do it this way, but then as you can see, I create loop cuts till the fork. Not necessarily maybe what I want. But what about maybe this way? I could maybe crease it this way. Yeah, then I get a loop cut this way. Well, maybe that's not good either. Let's see, how did I do this here? See, for example, here I used actually a creasing. So you remember in the last video, I started creasing edges and then I baked it. So I had a higher resolution mesh, which then I could sculpt again a little bit more. Yeah, 0.8. Let's leave it at that. And let's say we do the same here, 0.8. And maybe those last edges I do 0.8. Okay. So now this is sharper. And then to get this crease or folding I have here, all I did there was select certain loop cuts and then simply start scaling them together. And then that will itself already give you then this creased look or that effect. And maybe from a side they have to move down just a little bit. And of course this one and this one maybe could go in. So there you start seeing how this edge starts taking a little bit shape. Of course, that's not really a very good mesh model right now, but I hope that you will start getting the point how I'm starting to create the surfaces so everything blends between soft and hard edges. And one more time to illustrate you the function of the weight creasing and then maybe how you could utilize that when you bake your mesh. So this is very crisp. I go maybe to level 1, let's say apply, and let's create this modifier again. And then you see that everything is already a little bit tighter, and because I baked this modifier, I have now some loop cuts up here I could use and scale together. And you would say, well, no, I have loop cuts here anyway, so why didn't do that from the beginning? So let me actually go one step back, and then you see what the whole point behind this is. So here we are back to our fluid shape. So this up here is currently a rectangle. And let me create a ring with 12 points. So circle, 12 points, and scale it down. And maybe scale along this axis, and then I move it up a little bit, and let's see if I can bridge this. Hopefully it works. Yeah, actually it did. That's great. And this loop cut I'm going to delete, because let's say my design, I would like to have everything down here boxy, and then to the top part it flows up nicely into this round shape. And I'm going to skin this, and if I have a face and I press I can create an offset or an insert. So you see this way I created a loop cut that has a perfect size. And let's say at this point now, with a level 1, I go and hit bake apply. And then I go back to add a subdivision surface modifier. Of course, do I have a lot of extra curves points up here, but you see that up here it still remained its circular shape. So I could go ahead and then select those edges, for example. Going to hide all those. And then say scale them together. So that I start creasing this edge. So as you can see, and maybe those points here, they have to scale in a little bit as well. Okay. And you see that this rounding up there didn't change at all, so it remained the same. Now, if I'm back to this model, you see I have my original modifier, my low res, and if I create a loop cut, and let's say I do it this way and I do it this way, then, well, I have this loop cut added also in there, and you see it starts creasing. So maybe not really super ideal, because now I would have to go in and change this. Or because I now have 14 points, well, maybe at this point then I have to add a circle with 14 points. And you start getting probably already the idea that sometimes it's a lot of numbers counting, but fortunately you're really, because it's just polygon, you don't have to deal with surface trimming or continuity. This is a very fluid and flexible workflow, and I can just always change the layout and topology and cut pieces out and cut new pieces in. So now I changed, you see, my transition from nice and hard to soft, and I rebuilt the upper part. Just here maybe you see that I have some hard edges. So in this case I would have to go ahead and then start maybe softening this by scaling some of those points apart. So I have evenly long edges, and then that, for example, will take care of the problem with those creases I saw. You see now this is now nice and soft. There are no vertical creases anymore. So that's option 2. If you want to remain then having just a low polygon model and you don't want to go the apply approach with a VO1 modifier, so that you still have a fairly simple polygon model you could sculpt. And then you don't have to deal with the nightmare of a too dense mesh. But at the end, honestly, everything is just up to your preference and how you want to work, and also sometimes how the model dictates you how you have to work. So there's no necessarily right or wrong. There's more maybe an easier and a harder way, but they all have their advantages and disadvantages.